Hello and welcome to one and all. In today's class, we'll check out the what are all the causes of income and wealth inequalities in India. In the previous class, we have discussed that I've explained that there are income inequalities existing in India based on so many surveys conducted by several agencies. It was found out that income inequalities is persisting in India. So let us check out what are all the causes of those income inequalities, and later what are all the measures that are implemented by the government to solve the problem. So before that, the first one is the what are all the causes of income and wealth inequalities in India. So the first and foremost cause is something called as the inequalities in land ownership. So this during the time of British rule, they introduced a system called as the zamindari system. So these zamindars, they are actually the intermediaries between the farmers and the government. The zamindars, they are supposed to collect the rent from the farmers, and they have to pay that rent to the British government. So they were acting as an intermediary. So that system was introduced by the British government. But the problem is these zamindars, they exploited the situation and cheated the poor and ignorant farmers in the country. What they did was they collected more amount of rent from the farmers, and whatever required amount they have to be paid, they paid to the British government. But more than that, they collected in the form of rent from the farmers. And if the farmers were not able to repay the rent, then the lands were grabbed by them. So because of this reason, so many farmers, they lost their land. And or some of the farmers, they lost their entire land, and some of the farmers, the area of land became smaller and smaller, and because against the land, they started borrowing. So these zamindars exploited the situation, and most of the farmers in our country became the small farmers and marginal farmers. That is very, very poor farmers. Only the very minor percentage of the farmer in the country, they became the rich landlords. So because of this practice of zamindari system, there was a concentration of land in a few hands in the country. So that inequalities arose in the agricultural sector. But after independence, the government abolished the entire zamindari system, but still the implementation was not that much effective. Even today, it is not fulfilled completely. It is not fulfilled. So even today, nearly 2/3 of the farmers in the country, they come under the category of small and marginal farmers. The remaining 1/3 of the farmers are only the large farmers having more acres of land. So that was the reason for inequalities in the land ownership in our country. So let me put it in words. So there was concentration of land in India during the British period on account of the system called as the zamindari system introduced by the British government. But even though the government abolished this system after independence, the concentration of, see, I'm writing again. After explaining, I'm writing the points again because side by side the notes will also be over. Okay? So after independence, the concentration of land still persists in our country. So there's a, based on the data in 2010-11, it was estimated that nearly 85% of total land holdings, that is approximately two-thirds, the land holdings were marginal and small holdings with average, also you can highlight this, two-thirds or marginal and small holdings with average land holding size being only 0.38 hectares, while the remaining one-third or one-third, that is 0.7%, 85% small holding, marginal and small holding. The remaining one-third or 0.7% of the holding in the country were of large holdings with the, next page, with the average size being 17.37 hectares. Okay. See, to, I mean, this means what is the meaning of land holdings? Whatever the, see, land holding means the area, the average size of land held by a farmer. So the land holding, so this is the piece of land held by a farmer. So this is more than 10 hectares. Let us assume this piece of land is more than 10 hectares. So this much size of land, very small percentage of the farmers in our country, they are having holding land of more than 10 hectares. And if you, for example, if you are taking, that's what, 0.7% of the farmers in the country. So less than 1% of the farmers in the country, or less than 1% of the total holdings in the country were of the size of more than 10 hectares. So 17.37 hectares in the sense, if you, for example, you take the per capita income of only the richer sections of the population, and you take the per capita income of only the poorer sections of the population. So this is like taking the richer sections of the population. So we are taking only the average size of land held only by the big farmers. So that comes to around 17.37 hectares. But the majority of the 85%, the remaining two-thirds, they are having a small size of land holding. So this is, let us assume, small farmer. Okay, let me make this. This, let us assume this is the marginal holding. Marginal, the farmer who is having a piece of land which comes under the category of marginal holding is called as the marginal farmer. And the farmer who is holding a piece of land which comes under the category of small holding is called as the small farmer. So this is small holding. So small holding is called as the small farmer. So marginal farmer is the one who is having the land area of less than 1 hectare of land. So this is less than 1 hectare of land. So small farmer is one, slightly better, between 1 to 2. So less than 2 hectares and more than 1 hectare. So this is a small farmer who is holding 1 to 2 hectares of land. So what does this say? The 85% of the farmers or 85% of the land in our country are cultivated in holdings which is less than 1 hectare or less than 2 hectares. On an average, you take it is only 0. Both marginal holding and the small holding put together, on an average it is only 0.38 hectares. Okay, so but whereas only the very minute percentage of the farmers, they are cultivating in the land area of more than 10 hectares, the average size being 17.37 hectares. So now you can see the how much there is a wide inequality in the distribution of land. So automatically you can understand with such a small area of land what these people can cultivate. So that is the first reason for having the uh, concentration of land in rich landlords, very few rich landlords in our country, because of the introduction of zamindari system in our country. So the zamindars are most of the zamindars, they themselves are the landlords. Okay, so they cheat the farmers, and if the farmers are not able to pay the rent properly because of high rent, they are not able to pay with that amount, with a small piece of land, how much rent they, how much produce they can cultivate and how much rent they can pay, isn't it? So this situation they exploited, and they grabbed all the land. So the concentration of land in a very few rich landlords in our country. But even though it was abolished in our country between 1951 to 1960, the government abolished the zamindari system in our country, but it is not very effective. I mean, the defective implementation, it was not that much successful. That's why even today we are having that unequal distribution of land in our country. So that is the first reason. Then the second reason is concentration of assets in private corporate sector. So the private corporate sector, they are the rich industrialists or traders or whoever. They have the advantage of getting easy credit from banks and other financial institutions, and also they are having the advantage of issuing their shares in the open market. So through that also they are able to raise equity capital. But this facility is not available to the small businessmen. Okay, so more and more assets are concentrated in the private corporate sector. So one we have, the first one we have seen in the rural area. This is in the urban areas. So there is also a heavy concentration of assets in a few private corporate industrialists, traders, transporters, and other owners of property in the country, owners of urban property in the country. So what is the reason? Because of some advantages. So what is the advantage? They are able to get, the banks are willing to lend loan only to them. So they are able to like easy availability of credit, finance from banks and other financial institutions, and they can also raise equity capital from the open market by issuing their shares. So these are all not possible for the small industries, isn't it? So this is because nobody will purchase they are not that small scale industrialists, they are not that much reputed. So they, even if they issue the shares also, people will not have the confidence, so they will not be able to sell their shares. So this is not possible for small industries. So the very few uh, top industrialists, traders, transporters, they are all the people who are having lots and lots of assets. So the concentration of assets are vested with these few industrialists. But the majority of the small industrialists, they are deprived of their assets. So this is the reason in the urban private corporate sector. Okay. Then the third one is, the next reason is inequalities in professional training. Basically, the professionals in the sense that the IT professionals, doctors, lawyers, teachers, I mean, not teachers, chartered accountants. So these are all the professionals. You know that because of their qualification, specialization, their income earning opportunity is much, much higher than the rest of the categories of job. That is one thing, and that is understandable. And also the second reason is, apart from that qualification, these some of the privileged sections of the population, they are able to get that professional training also. So because of that opportunity, they are able to get the one, on the one hand their qualification is high, and also apart from the qualification, they are able to get that professional training, and that also increases their income earning opportunity. But in our country, the chances, the opportunity for getting that professional training is also not available for everyone in the country. That is also restricted or confined or affordable only to the selected or the privileged sections of the population. So for example, the doctor's son or daughter can become a doctor. A chartered accountant's son or daughter can become a chartered accountant. What about the son or daughter of an agricultural labor, isn't it? So generation after generation, one section of the population, they continue to afford to high amount of qualification, proper training, and another section of the population, generation after generation, they are deprived of the facilities. So that is the inequalities in professional training. So generally, the incomes of professionals like doctors, engineers, IT professionals, etc., are high because of their profession and also due to their training. So the training facility is also not available for to all the sections of the population in our country. That's what this point refers to. Okay, but the problem is the required amount of, not amount, the required training in our country is available only to a privileged few in the country. So majority of the population, they are not able to get that required amount of training. It cannot be afforded by majority of the population. So automatically their income of earning opportunity becomes lesser and lesser. So that is the inequalities in professional training. Then the fourth point is inflation and price rise. So inflation and price rise continuously right from the time the planning process was started in our country from 1950s. Because of the expenditure of the government, economic development is taking place in the country and the government started initiating the planning process. So automatically the expenditure of the government keeps on increasing. Because of this huge amount of expenditure, what happened, there was too much of circulation of money in the country started happening right from the time India attained independence and the planning process started. So this led to inflation or price rise in the country. Continuous rise in the general price level is known as inflation. So this price rise, who will benefit because of the price rise and who will suffer because of the price rise? Automatically, all the traders, the entrepreneurs, they will all get more amount of profit because of the price rise. But the majority of the wage earner, the salary class people and other wage earners in the country, they incomes will not rise according to the rise in the prices of the goods and services in the country. So they will have to suffer compared to the other entrepreneurs or traders or other capitalists who are benefiting out of the prices. And this price rise is inevitable, it is unavoidable because of the process of economic development happening in the country. Okay, so that also led to income inequalities. So since 1950s, that is right from the time of planning, the general price level has been continuously rising. So inflation benefits only the capital class, all the entrepreneurs, capitalists, that is the the money lenders, traders, they all come under the category of capital class. Capital class like entrepreneurs, traders, entrepreneurs or industries, etc. Because they can get huge amount of profit. But the working class suffer because the common man will not be able to afford the goods and services because of the rise in price level, and their income will not increase. So the value of money, the value of their purchasing power keeps on decreasing. So that is another reason for inequalities in the country. Then the fifth one is the inequalities in credit facilities. So the credit facilities, the banks and other financial institutions, they are willing to lend loans only to the rich industrialists or rich landlords. It is not available for the other sections of the population because they are all credit worthy. So the banks are uh, eager to lend loans only to those sections of the population, but not for the majority of the small businessmen or the small or marginal farmers. So that also, because of the easy availability of credit, they keep on expanding their business. Okay. So the second point we saw, isn't it? Concentration of assets in the private sector. The same thing. So the banks and other financial institutions are ready to lend credit only to big industrialists or large farmers. But the small scale producer or a small farmer are deprived of this. So what they do, they will borrow from the money lenders who charge high rate of interest. Same like zamindars, when they were borrowing under the zamindari system, the same thing. Instead of zamindars, it is now the money lenders. And they have to borrow from, they have to depend on money lenders at a high rate of interest. Okay. Then the next reason is urban bias. Bias means partiality. Urban bias in private investment. So the private investment, where the private sector will invest, a private producer, if he is investing, he will check in which area if he invests, he will get more and more amount of profit, isn't it? So automatically he will invest only in the urban areas instead of rural areas, because only in the urban areas all the infrastructural facilities are developed. So automatically more and more people will come forward to invest only in the private, especially the private investment. They will come forward to invest only in the urban areas. But uh, the problem is, we all know that agriculture is the major contributing sector for employment in our country. That means what? Majority of the population, they are depending on agriculture, and they are all living in the rural areas. So the major percentage of the population, they are living in the rural areas, but the major percentage of the investment is happening in the urban area, isn't it? So it is just the opposite. So what is happening in the urban areas? The investment is happening, industries are being developed, the business activities are happening in the urban areas, but then people are available, only the labor force is available, more labor force is available in the rural area. So the what they are doing, since uh, that much required amount of labor force is not available in the urban area, they are replacing, instead of labor intensive, they are using capital intensive. The mechanization is happening. So that is what is happening, that the mechanization happens, the share of wages will become lesser. Out of the total income, the share of profits will be more compared to the share of wages. Okay, so that is urban bias in private investment. So you all know that nearly 70% of private investment is made in urban areas due to infrastructural facilities. We all know that the infrastructural facilities are better in the urban areas than in the rural areas. Even though 70% of the population live in rural areas. So as it is, there is a regional disparities. Urban areas become more developed compared to the rural areas. So this is what is called as the urban bias in private investment. Okay. So what is the other problem here? So this pattern of investment favors mechanization, so the share of wages in national income is relatively lower compared to profit and interest. Okay. See, for example, the total national income is equal to rent plus wages plus interest plus profit. So this is how, if it is percent, if this is 70%, wages are 70%, all the other three are 30%, that is equal distribution. But if wages is only 30%, but all the others are 70%, that is unequal distribution, because in any country, the laborers will be more. So the share of wages should be more compared to profit, interest, or rent. But if the urban, because of the mechanization, what is happening? The share of wages are becoming lesser. The share of profits and interest and rent are becoming more. So that leads to unequal distribution. And finally, the role of government. Normally, the role of the government should be wherever these problems are happening, the government is supposed to set right. So if there is an urban bias, the government should start investing in the rural areas. But that is not happening in our country. The government is also supporting the private investment, because the government, they need the support of all these big industrialists, uh, all the traders, landlords. So the government is also supporting only the whatever the investment, the government is supporting only the complementing the investment of the private sector. So the government investment is also not rectifying that urban bias. That's what it means. So even though the state, that is the state government is supposed to make the required economic changes, that is whatever the defects happening in the private sector, that has to be in the form of income inequalities. The state government has to amend that, correct it. That changes the state has to do, but then the state is helpless. The state is helpless as it itself is depending on large private players in the market, and the state investment in our country is only supporting the private investment. It's complementing the private investment. It is not substituting in another way. It's only complementing. It's only supporting private investment. Okay. So the role of government is also not able to rectify the mistake done by the private sector. So government is also, their investment is also going in same area. Wherever a little bit of shortfall is there in the private investment in the urban area, the government investment is also going there only to rectify the compensate that shortfall. It is not, government is also not making the investment in the rural areas. And with the announcement of liberalization and all, still the government is favoring, indirectly the government is favoring only the private sector. So all these are accentuating or increasing the income inequalities in our country. Okay, hope understood. all of you. See, I wrote the answers also because these are all the important questions from the board exam point of view. Okay. So if you like this video, please, if you find this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any doubts, any suggestions, mention it in the comment box. Okay. So next class, we will check out the remedial measures for income inequalities. So until my next class, next video, take care. Bye-bye.